Today, we'll be talking about intellectual development, the development of the brain for kids 4 to 6. Right. So, um, with that, we need to, when we first talk about or think about the idea of intellectual development, we need to think about what is intelligence, right? How intelligent are their kids? Most caregivers and parents want to know how well their kids are going to do in school, how quickly they're going to learn to read and count, these kinds of things, right? These skills build the basis for later schoolwork. And they sort of want to think about and hypothesize what their school experiences, what they learn in school, how that's going to shape their lives, right? Because everything they're doing as kids is going to have an impact on later on in their life. One way that we are able to sort of think about intelligence is, with these questions in mind. I guess I'll go that way. Is with these questions in mind, we have, because of human nature, developed tests, right? We want to be able to test someone for their intelligence level, right? So the first intelligent test was developed back in 1905. Then in 1916, there was a big revision to sort of this test. So this test is commonly referred to as the Stanford-Binet test. It's very common that we then put numbers to these tests, right? I mean, every test you take, there's a grade, right? That's number based. We have taken this Stanford-Binet test. We've developed a mathematical formula that gives a number value, and this is what we talk about as an IQ, or the intelligence quotient. Okay, the average child, and this is of any age. That the questions that are in this test are age based. So it's the idea is you're asking questions based on what that child should know at that age. So the number really shouldn't change, and the average child will have an IQ somewhere between 80 and 119. Under 80, we have some learning disabilities that typically are the cause of that. Sometimes it's environmental as well. And then over 120 and over, you start talking about gifted and genius and things like that, right? Typically, the intelligence tests are composed of tasks and questions. Again, based on what we expect that child to know at that age. However, over the years, there are a lot of critics and a lot of people that say that relying on intelligence tests to rank the children's mental abilities have several drawbacks. Okay? And we have really expanded upon that notion in more recent years as well. So some of the issues that some people have had with the IQ tests are that no single test can really give an accurate measure of a child's mental abilities, right? Every test that's given is going to be biased in one way or another, right? It's going to be more math related, or it's going to be more on reading ability, right? Things like that. So they're going to give greater weight to certain abilities and lesser weight to others. Not every child excels at the same things, right? Every child is unique and has their own identity and is good at certain things. Some of you are good at math. Some of you are good at science. Some of you are good at physical recognition and building things, or using your body in ways to excel, whether that's building something, running fast, things like that, right? So that's one issue. Sometimes there are factors that have nothing to do with intelligence that can influence those results, right? So if you give this IQ test to a kid that's not feeling well or is sick, or if they're really stressed for who knows what reasons, a whole host of reasons, that can impact what the final outcome is. So we need to be careful with the administration of those tests and not just do it one time. I mean, if any of you have ever felt like you have test anxiety, right? You know the information, you know the answers that are on the test, but because it's in that test setting, you have that anxiety and that stress because you feel like you have to do good on this test. That can impact the end results of that test, which is why most schools don't rely, and when I say most, I mean virtually all schools don't rely solely on test scores for grades, right? We're also including participation in class. We're also including homework and projects and other ways that you can showcase that you understand the information that we're trying to teach you, right? Overall scores, like that IQ score that's going to come from this mathematical procedure, it's not telling us about any individual strengths and weaknesses, right? Two people can have the exact same IQ score. One person can be better at math. The other person can be better at reading or writing, right? So they have different abilities. So it's important that we use the IQ test, but it's just one of many tools to determine the intelligence of a person, or especially as a child. So a little more localized aspect to this is, this is why there's been a push for state testing, right? That's one tool we can use to prove that a child has learned what they need to learn in order to graduate high school. But we don't want to have that being the only arrow in our quiver. We need to also look at other factors as well. And the reason why is just because we have this concept of multiple intelligences. So what that means is, going back to the not every child is the same. Everyone excels at different things, right? So we have some different types of intelligence out there. So to go through them, we're going to start with linguistic intelligence. So that's a sensitivity to language. And what that means is you're able to learn languages pretty easily. You're able to use language to accomplish your goals. So when you're thinking about the types of people that typically have a high linguistic intelligence, we're thinking about writers or poets or lawyers, right? People that are using language to benefit themselves, to benefit others as a tool, right? The next one would be logical or mathematical intelligence. These are people that are able to analyze problems using logic. They're performing mathematical operations. They're exploring these issues scientifically, right? So these are your research scientists. These are your mathematicians. They are very logic-based. They are seeing something that they want to explore, and they're developing either experiments or accumulating statistical data and pouring through that to find out what the answer is through this logic and mathematical operations. The third one is spatial intelligence, which is understanding the potential use of space. So you're thinking in three-dimensional terms. You can look at something and visualize what the end product is going to be, right? So these are architects, these are landscape designers, these are construction workers who can look at a blank slate and visualize what the end product is. I'm currently right now just finishing up a kitchen remodel in my house. I was able to, I feel like I have a pretty good spatial intelligence. I was able to visualize what it's going to look like at the end, right? I could draw it out on a piece of paper. This is what it's going to look like. This is the layout that would work best in that space, and then be able to actually put it together. So, that is relying on spatial intelligence. The next one is musical intelligence, and this one's pretty straightforward. It's being able to have skill in performing, composing, and appreciating musical patterns, right? Everyone likes music. Everyone likes some style of music. They listen to music, they like it. But that's different than being able to perform or compose it or write music. So I have a very low musical intelligence. I cannot play instruments. I've tried multiple instruments. I'm not good at it. I can't listen to a song and know what key it's in, right? But someone like Mr. Shipman has a very high musical intelligence. He can listen to a pop song, or a song that is that everyone's listening to now, and he can rewrite the music so that the marching band can play that song, right? With traditional marching band instruments. That is a high musical intelligence. The next one's bodily or kinesthetic intelligence, and that has to do with the potential use of one's body to solve problems, right? And then using the mind to coordinate body movements. These are people that would have a high level of hand-eye coordination. Athletes have a very high bodily and kinesthetic intelligence. I would also argue that construction workers typically have a high kinesthetic intelligence as well. Being able to swing a hammer and hit a nail and not hit your fingers takes a lot of hand-eye coordination, right? To be able to use a circular saw and cut straight, right, requires hand-eye coordination, which would require this type of intelligence. The next one would be interpersonal intelligence. This is involving the potential to understand the intentions and motivations of others. Right? So being able to understand what other people want and being able to provide that. So these are people like teachers and counselors, religious and political leaders. If they have a high interpersonal intelligence, they can work well with other people. Okay? This could be even, managers, supervisors, CEOs of companies, the ones that are really good, the ones that are good bosses, the good teachers, the good counselors, the pastor or the priest or the senator that you really connect with. These are people that have a very high interpersonal intelligence. This is also one of the intelligence that people will often take advantage of, right? There's all these shows on Netflix and Hulu and stuff of serial killers that or cult leaders that influence someone to do something they normally wouldn't. They have a very high interpersonal intelligence. It's just unfortunately they're using it for the wrong reasons, right? Now, conversely, intrapersonal intelligence is a little bit different. Instead of being able to understand someone else and so what the motivations of others are, you're able to understand yourself, okay? Including your hopes, your fears, your motivations, okay? And basically what this means is someone who's able to regulate or control their own actions, right? And be able to understand what's going on in their head and in their gut. This is someone who has a high intrapersonal intelligence. So to go on the other aspect of this, someone who would be, that is very angry easily, right? They lose their temper very easily, or they're a crier, right? They don't know what to do. They're stressed out and they just cry because they don't know what else to do. This is someone who would have a low intrapersonal intelligence. So, being able to understand and regulate your own actions and control what is coming out of your mouth and what you're doing is someone that has a high intrapersonal intelligence. The last one is a naturalist intelligence, and this is someone that can recognize and draw upon the features of the environment. Okay? So I look at people that are good with this as like biologists, right? Wildlife biologists, environmentalists, people that can look at the natural world and see what needs to be done to enhance it or to keep it the way it is. I would also argue that most outdoors people are like this as well, right? They can look and see people who are hunters, people who are good woodsmen. They're able to read tracks, track animals, see what is, look at a field or a woodlot and recognize what types of trees are there, what kind of plant and animal species are there, and then being able to manipulate it to help both plant and animal species conservation work. These are the type of people that have a high naturalist intelligence. Everyone has a level of all these intelligences, right? It's all in us, and we all have a blend of them. There are certain ones that are better than others, certain ones that are worse than others. It's what we need to look at with these intelligences as caregivers is we need to identify what the child excels at, right? If a child is particularly high in spatial intelligence, we need to give them learning opportunities that will build those strengths, right? But at the same time, we also need to identify ones that a child might be struggling with. Maybe, and it's pretty often that a child may struggle in the beginning with some intrapersonal intelligences, understanding how to control their emotions and their actions. And we need to make sure that we're helping them develop even the ones that they have a challenge with, right? We need to enhance the ones they're good at, and then we also need to help build up the ones they're not quite as good at. Okay? Moving on with some intellectual development, we're going to talk about some different psychologists here. The first one we're going to talk about is Jean Piaget. He spent he talked a lot about the development of people as a whole, like how they learn, how they develop their intellectual ability. Basically, the one we're going to really focus on here is the time between the ages of 2 and 7, which he called the pre-operational period. Okay? This is when children are oriented or directed inward and learn from very concrete evidence. So they need to learn from their own perspective, and they're not able to really think in abstract terms. Okay? So they're going to be using things like make-believe play. So they're learning through imaginative play, which is typically very fantasy or dramatic play, but they're still imitating real-life situations that they see on a daily basis. This is why we see a lot of kids playing house or playing school, or they might be really into ninjas because of the type of TV shows that they see, right? So they start acting like a ninja, things like that. Okay? They're going to use symbols that so that the child can learn that objects and words can be symbols. Okay? So they're starting to recognize that a stop sign means stop. Right? They can start recognizing. We play games like red light, green light. When you see green, you can move. When you see red, you need to stop. Okay? They're starting to understand some of those symbols. They're also going to have an egocentric viewpoint. So they're viewing the world in terms of their own thoughts and feelings. Okay? When you ask a child, why the grass is green, the child may say, because that green is my favorite color. The grass isn't growing for any other reasons or isn't that color for any other reason other than the fact that that's their favorite color. Right? And they're also going to have a very limited focus as well. So with that, if we take 2 glasses and we fill them with water, but one glass is tall and skinny and the other glass is short and fat, and even if we pour the same amount of water in, they're going to recognize that taller, skinnier glass has more water in it because the water's higher from the bottom of the glass, right? They're not able to distinguish the fact that it's the same amount of water just because of the height difference. It's a very limited focus. Just to go over real quick the different periods of Jean Piaget's theory. Birth to 2 years is sensory motor. Okay? So they're learning through their senses and their own actions. That 2 to 7 pre-operational, it's the children's own activities, what they perceive at the moment, which we just talked about. 7 through 11 years old is concrete operation. So children are starting to think logically, but their still best learning experiences through their best way of learning is through experience. And then formal operations from 11 years old through adulthood, people are then able to conduct abstract thinking and think on their own. The next psychologist that we're going to talk about is Lev Vygotsky. He was very influential, but his work definitely differed from Piaget, right? So Piaget maintained that learning stages children go through are part of a natural human maturing process, right? So they're going to mature and learn just like in the same vein that they grow in height and weight, right? But Vygotsky thought this is, learning and development is too complex to be divided in these neat stages. So he is really stressing that children are learning at an individual rate, and they're going to learn very distinctively in that individual rate. So they're going to learn based on language and social interactions, and the children are going to play a key role in their own education and teaching their peers as well, right? So it's dependent upon the social environment. It's not just they're going to learn for the sake of learning, but it depends on their social environment for the way that they learn, right? So he believed that students, especially children, should learn through collaboration and projects as opposed to just lecturing. So we're going to have, if we would develop a classroom based on his theories, we would have clusters of tables for teamwork and small group learning. We're going to give them the option to teach each other. Teachers are going to have students take turn leading these small group discussions in particular topics. So that probably sounds familiar to you, because that is one teaching tool that a lot of teachers utilize, including myself, right? So one thing that you'll probably notice as we're reading through some of this, some of it's going to seem somewhat familiar because teachers have used it. We sort of use all of these tools, right? Again, not having one arrow in our quiver. Okay. The biggest thing Vygotsky really threw out there that we have based school on, and really all of life's learning on, is that there is a major importance of past experiences to learning and prior knowledge, right? We build upon what we already know to learn the next thing, which when you think about math makes sense. We don't just throw kindergartners into calculus because they're not going to understand it. We teach kids how to count first, then we teach them how to add and subtract, then multiply and divide, and then it gets more and more complex as they go through the school system and what they learn. The last one we're going to talk about is Montessori's theory. So this was developed by Dr. Maria Montessori. She actually has developed her own school, which there's roughly 4,000 of them, a little bit more now, throughout the nation that utilize her methods, her theory in their teaching. Okay, so her idea was basically, and this is back from the 1930s, 20s, and 30s, that she theorized this, is that they learn naturally if they're placed in a proper, prepared learning environment. Okay? So if we give the kids an environment that is conducive to learning, meaning that it is an environment that is natural for them to learn in, they are going to learn. Okay? So we want to give them activities that will help make future activities and learning easier. So before we teach kids how to write, right, we're going to play games with them that engage them in activities designed to strengthen the muscles in their hands and fingers. Okay? We're focusing on the development of senses and language and motor skills, right? And that is going to prepare that child's mind and their body for future learning within their school career. Okay? So she basically focused on designing a classroom to be an environment in which children can learn by themselves and from each other. Now, we're still guiding them through certain activities. We're providing them with those activities. We're not throwing them in an empty room. We're putting them in a room that has items and activities and a bright classroom with things on the wall that they can learn, that they want to learn, right? So we're allowing them an independence, right? If a student's engaged in a task, we're not interrupting that task because a student is actively learning, okay? That kind of thing. So, which we do take, again, parts of her theory, and we keep doing this. But we have learned through research later that we can't solely just let kids go, right, and let them do. We still need to direct them. but what we have found is while all of these theories are good in some aspects, they lack in others, right? So we need to sort of mix and take a little bit of both and really make sure that they work, right? If you would decide to teach, if you decide I want to go into teaching and I do want to teach at a Montessori school, you're going to actually receive very specific special training in that Montessori method. That is vastly different than the type of, similar yet very much different than the type of training I received, right? Because with the traditional schooling that we've developed now and teaching techniques that we have now, there is some interruption, where with Montessori there is absolutely no interruption at all, right? There's no textbooks, right? We're just using the environment. And it has worked with some students with special needs. It has worked extremely well with English language learners. But I would be hesitant to say that it is the best way to go about for all students, right? Everyone, again, learns sort of individually and has their own things they excel at. So we need to be aware of that.